lives, and he would sit at the table with us. And all of a sudden, through a series of questions and him listening, he just begins to navigate his way to our hearts. And before we realize it, we're sharing the deepest secrets in us, and he's walking around our vulnerabilities, and we feel seen and heard and known and loved. And Jesus is doing what Jesus does, which is finding us, rescuing us, and loving our souls. And gentlemen in the room, it might be like this when you find yourself around a bonfire or something like that, and all of a sudden you're getting vulnerable around this bonfire. And you're like, whoa, what have the embers and the flame done to the ways that I'm talking? And you start to open up and let people in. And we're in a series right now that we're calling My Story, where we believe that Jesus is working in this student ministry and in your hearts. And we don't think that you're tomorrow's leaders, we think you're today's leaders. And Jesus is doing things in your lives. And so we're going to enter into a series just for a handful of weeks where you guys as students are going to be sharing your story. And tonight we have Ariana up where she's going to be talking about her journey, her story, her walk with Jesus, and how the power of the gospel has transformed and changed her. So let me say one more thing before I officially finally hand the mic over. This sister standing next to me, she's been in our internship all year. And Ariana, publicly, I'm so proud of you, man. She has a wisdom that is beyond her years, and she has a sincerity of spirit that's really beautiful and attractive and contagious. And her intimacy with Jesus is real, and she loves Jesus. But even more than that, Jesus loves Ariana, okay? Which really is the emphasis of the gospel, okay? So can we give her one more round of applause before we jump into tonight? Proud of you, sister.
Thank you.
The room is yours.
Okay, hi guys. Like Tyler said, my name is Ariana, and I've been one of the high school interns here this year, so you've probably seen me up here leading games and all that. Little bit about me. I'm the oldest of 4 girls. There should be a picture up here of my family. My sister, the one in the orange dress, wanted me to make sure I told you guys I am now the second shortest. She has recently surpassed me in height. That's her biggest flex right now. She wanted me to make sure I told you guys that. But yeah, I have a really amazing family, and I love all things music. I'm going to be a music teacher. Something most people don't know about me is that I'm a theater kid. So I like being on stage, but I don't like being on stage as myself because it's too vulnerable. I don't like being vulnerable in front of one person, so being vulnerable in front of a room like this is really intimidating for me. I've carefully selected each stone and built up a wall so strong that the only way to take it down is to bring a sledgehammer to it. And I've been asked by God and his church to do just that by telling you my story. I've grown up in a Christian household and have been hearing about Jesus for my entire life. I became a Christian when I was 6. I was in the kids ministry at the church that I was attending at the time. And the guy on stage, I don't remember anything about what he said except for, if you want to become a Christian, kneel down and pray this prayer with me. So little 6-year-old me got down on my knees and I prayed the prayer that he led us in. And I remember being so excited to tell my dad that day when he came to pick me up. I immediately ran up to him and said, "Dad, I became a Christian today." And from then on, I've followed Jesus. I've always been really worried about making sure that I'm doing things the right way. I want to say the right thing. I want to do the right thing. I want to think the right thing. And I knew that the next right thing to do in my faith was to be baptized. People got baptized after they became a Christian to show that they loved Jesus and wanted to follow him for the rest of their life. So knowing what the next right step was, I got baptized when I was 7. From then until high school, my life was somewhat easy. I didn't have many worries or any big trials. In 5th grade, I moved churches to a community that I lived closer to and that had girls who were closer to my age. I joined the youth ministry at this church, and I became very involved. But I had this overwhelming desire to fit in with the girls in my small group and to make my leaders like me. I wanted to be the good kid who came to church every week, who served in the children's ministry, who shared in small group, but who also had her life kind of figured out and put together. So I became that person. I hid big sin struggles and questions and only shared enough to make it seem like I was actually being vulnerable. I unknowingly began to construct a wall that would become virtually unbreakable by later in high school. I thought that to be loved and valued by those around me, I needed to put up this perfect persona. So that's what I did. Halfway through my 8th grade year, my family began attending fellowship. It immediately felt like home for me, and I was really excited to dive into this new community. But I continued the habit that I had begun. I shared enough to be considered the good kid who came to church, could be counted on to share in small group, but I didn't share enough for people to see any of the messy parts of me. That year, I went on my first epic retreat, and it was one of the best experiences ever. I felt the Spirit moving in ways that I never had before, and I was so excited to continue in my walk with the Lord. With how my freshman year started, I thought that I was about to have the best year of my life. I was wrong. I began to get really depressed that year, and I was constantly feeling overwhelmed. Satan was putting so many lies into my head, and I believed them. One of them was about soccer. I had quit soccer 2 years prior, but all of my other sisters still played. My dad was the one who would take care of all of the soccer things, driving, setting up training, and all those other things. I began to believe that the only way that I could have a good relationship with him was to play soccer, but I did not want to play anymore. So I spent my freshman year thinking that my dad preferred my sisters over me simply because of soccer, which wasn't true at all. I also felt really different from my family, and I felt so isolated from them, so I avoided large amounts of family time because it hurt too bad. Then I really began to spiral. There was a tension between me and my then best friend. School was all of a sudden way harder than it had ever been. I had always been able to excel with minimal effort, but all of a sudden, school seemed somewhat impossible. I had prided myself on being the kid who never needed help with school, but when I began to realize that maybe I should ask for help, I pushed it away because my sisters needed help more than me. I started to have suicidal thoughts, especially in moments when I was really overwhelmed. This all came to a head sometime in March or April when there was a night that I was alone in my room, which is really rare since I've shared a room with my sister. And my thoughts terrified me. I was afraid that I would go to a place beyond my own reason. I put the radio on in hopes that it would distract me from my spiraling thoughts, and the song Heaven Help Me by Zach Williams came on. I remember laying on my bed with my hands outstretched, sobbing the words of the song as a prayer. I wrote my mom a note asking her to talk and left it on her coffee machine since I knew that would be the first thing she saw when she got up. The next morning, I spent 30 minutes trying to say what was going on, but I couldn't say it because it made the problem real, and it made me messy, and it made me broken. Finally, I told her for the first time what my mental state had been like all year, and a few weeks later, I started seeing a therapist. This went really well for a short period of time, and then I began to hide things from her, which you should never do from your therapist. It's kind of the opposite of why you go. She had a very blunt manner, and that's not the way that I communicate. I like to beat around the bush and want you to get the idea of what I'm saying, but I'm probably not going to tell you what that is. So I was afraid of the way that she would react to things I would say to her. I also really just wanted her to like me, and I wanted to be the easy client, the, oh my gosh, yes, I love her client. So this continued throughout my sophomore year, and while this was happening, I was experiencing a really hard season with friendship. My wall of self-protection was more fortified than it had ever been. I had only told a small handful of people about my mental health problems freshman year, and out of that group, one became jealous and bitter towards me. One was unjustly angry with me. One dumped me, and 2 of them ended up staying. I decided that I would never allow my heart to be that hurt again. So even as I became closer with my now best friend, she didn't even see all the parts of me. I was always the bubbly, happy girl who was ready to have a good time and ready to laugh. Junior year was a pretty good year, but I still hid the most vulnerable parts of me from everyone. I didn't like for people to see me express any emotion except for happiness. And anything that was messy just got thrown in the back and hidden. I had stopped going to that first therapist after I finally told my mom that I was hiding things from her, and I started with a new therapist who I connected with better. But even she didn't know everything about me. The June following my junior year changed that. My uncle suddenly passed away in the beginning of June. He had gone in for stitches on a Tuesday, and a little over a week later, he passed away. The day before he died, I was at my first liminal class. I remember feeling this deep desire in me for people who knew me. Didn't just know my perfect exterior that I was putting up, but people who could see behind my wall. But I didn't know how to let them in, and I was afraid of them seeing my mess. In check-in that day, I had the lowest number by far. Everyone was enjoying summer and was excited for the class. Their numbers were 7s, 8s, but I was really hurting. It may seem insignificant for me to say, I'm at a 4 today, but it was really rare for me to even be that candid with someone and tell them that I was having a hard week. A month after my uncle passed away, we went on our liminal trip. I was sleep-deprived, hungry, and mentally exhausted, but I never cried. And for someone whose first reaction to anything is to cry, that was really surprising. I had prepared everyone on the trip with the inevitable reality that I would cry, and I told them to fix it with chocolate and hugs. But I never cried. And as I was reflecting on the trip later on, I began to question why. The question that I wrote down in my journal was, how is my wall so sturdy that even in a moment that is meant to bring me to the end of myself, to the point when I have no wall left, how is it still up? Fast forward another month, my family was on a trip out west. It was my sister's birthday, and we were about to go whitewater rafting when we got a text saying that my great-grandma was in the hospital and was dying. I remember feeling actual sickness in that moment with grief. It was exactly 2 months and 1 day after losing my uncle. We came back from the trip and were able to see my grandma a few times before she passed away in the middle of August. At this point, I lost control over my emotions. The wall that I had so steadily built up had begun to crack. A few weeks later, I was at Epic, and I cried in every single session. In the opening fun session, when everyone was jumping around and having a really good time, I was standing in the back of the room, sobbing. Right after Epic, I went on a trip with some high schoolers from my co-op. I was standing in the middle of Buc-ee's holding an armful of stuffed animals. I was laughing about it. The next thing I knew, I was standing there sobbing. I couldn't tell you why then, and I truly can't tell you why now. That began the next few months of crying, all the time. I cried constantly in front of my friends who had never seen me cry up till this point. I would cry because I was tired, because I was worried, because this was my senior year, and I would also cry because I couldn't decide what I wanted from Chick-fil-A, which happened more than once. All of the perfection and the control that I had carefully built up had begun to shatter, and my emotions were no longer under my control. Then in November, as I was on my way to a scholarship competition with my parents, we got another text. My grandpa, who had been moved into a nursing home a couple of months before, wasn't doing well. We were told to go see him that day if we wanted to see him again. In that moment, I remember wondering why God kept bringing so many hardships into my life. A couple of days later, my grandpa passed away. I had lost 3 family members in 6 months. After some hard and complicated situations with other people following my grandpa's death, my life felt like utter chaos. Through this, I had been a part of phase 2 of Liminal, but I started to realize that it wasn't possible for me to keep up with all of my other commitments and Liminal. I ended up stepping out of the process with the class, but that began a liminal process that the Lord was bringing me through. For me to admit that I wasn't able to keep up with everything on my plate and to step away from the class was really hard for me because my perfect exterior of being able to stay on top of all of my commitments was cracking. Since then, God has been showing me that my pursuit of perfection isn't necessary to have a relationship with Him, and that the people who truly love me don't require that of me either. The pursuit of perfection is such a major theme throughout my story. So what is perfectionism? Perfectionism is the pursuit of perfection. And that might sound a little circular, and that's because perfectionism is. It's an endless cycle with an unattainable goal. It's exhausting. Trying to always be what someone else wants or expects you to be is draining and impossible to sustain. This quote by Brené Brown is a spot-on explanation of perfectionism. She says, "Perfectionism is a self-destructive and addictive belief system that fuels the primary thought, if I look perfect and do everything perfectly, I can avoid or minimize the feelings of shame, judgment, and blame. It's a form of protection against things that are outside of your control." Matthew 11:28 is one of my favorite verses and has recently just been such an encouragement to me. It says, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." This place has been such a place of freedom and refuge for me. It's the only place in the entire Bible when Jesus pulls back the veil and shows us his heart. And what he shows us is one of the most freeing and beautiful things. He doesn't say that he's demanding and holy or that he's just and sovereign. He says that he's gentle and lowly. So what does it mean to serve a God who is gentle and lowly in heart? The Greek word gentle here is only used 3 other times. In Matthew 5:5, it says, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." In Matthew 21:5, it says, "Say to the daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming to you, humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a beast of burden." And in 1 Peter 3:4, "But let your adorning be the hidden person of the heart with the imperishable beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, meek, humble, and gentle." This is the heart of God for his people. The word for lowly is generally translated as humble, but not humility as a virtue. The humility in the sense of being thrust downward by life's circumstances. The book Gentle and Lowly has been such an encouragement to me as I'm reading through it this year. And if you haven't read it, I would highly recommend it to you. We have it for sale out in the cafe, and it's just the most beautiful book that explains God's heart for sinners and sufferers. The author explains here, the point in saying that Jesus is lowly is that he is accessible. For all of his resplendent glory and dazzling holiness, his supreme uniqueness and otherness, no one in human history has ever been more approachable than Jesus Christ. No prerequisites, no hoops to jump through. Jesus doesn't require our perfection. He doesn't require anything of us except ourselves, our messy, broken, and hurting selves. Another part of this verse that's so beautiful to me is where it says that all who labor and are heavy laden are to come to him. Our burdens and our struggles are not something that Jesus just puts up with. They are the very thing that qualifies us to come to him. That messy sin that no one knows about, that baggage that you carry, the doubts and the questions, those are what cause Jesus to reach out to you. It's his very happiness and his joy to bring you into his rest. He wants you just as you are, without striving for perfection. He doesn't say that his rest is for those who have been following him for a certain amount of time, or for the one whose life looks a certain way, or for someone who has never doubted him, but simply for those who cry out to him. In the midst of our imperfections and our mess, Jesus invites us to take his yoke of kindness upon us and to walk into his rest. So what has it meant for me to follow a God who is gentle and lowly and who calls those who are labor and are heavy laden? Jesus' gentle and lowly heart, his humble and his accessible heart, gives me the freedom to come to him without my wall of perfection. He wants me just as I am. He wants my questions, he wants my doubts, my sorrows, and my joys. His call for those who labor and are heavy laden means that Jesus doesn't save and love me in spite of my imperfections, but rather because of them. His heart is for the sinner, and it is his very joy to meet me in my mess. Jesus' voice in Matthew 11 is gentle and inviting. He calls us out of our exhausting struggle with perfection and into his presence. He calls us to learn from him, and what he calls us to learn is his heart, his gentle and lowly heart, his heart that desires to save us and love us and give us rest. That's my story.
Sister, hey, that was lights out, man. Hey, thank you for sharing. Guys, one more time for Ariana tonight, man. Unreal. Hey, as the band is coming up on stage, let me have one final thought and remark here. I don't know if you know this, but Ariana coming up tonight, she was pretty nervous to get up here and share. And sister, the Lord gave you a peace and a tranquility and a contentment and a calmness as you were sharing. That was beautiful. Hey, thank you for being raw and real and vulnerable with us, man. Way to go. Hey, one final time for Ariana tonight, fam. Proud of you, sis. Way to go. Oh, hey, don't forget your Jesus loves you. Yeah, that was your physical, visible encouragement right there. Hey, one final thing, man, before we jump into singing tonight. There's a little hidden secret tucked in behind the veil of this series. And it's this right here. It's kind of obvious, but it's so obvious it's hidden in plain sight. And it's that the fact that you're in the room tonight is evidence of God's goodness and mercy on your life. Like the fact that you're in the room is evidence that Jesus himself, the King of the cosmos, is hot on your trail. That he wants to know you and he loves you and he's pursuing you. And in fact, he's been pursuing you since your very first breath. And he wants to meet you and have an encounter with you. And we've titled this series, My Story, because the reality is everyone in this room has a story. And Jesus wants it, man. He wants your heart. He's hungry for your heart. He's relentless in his pursuit and finding of us. The good news of the gospel is this: Jesus loves, it's his delight, it's his heart, Ariana said, to make old things new, dead things alive, and lost things found. That is the good news of the kingdom. And he's inviting us into that kingdom. And he actually wants you to not just be like partakers in the kingdom who enjoy the heavenly inheritance that is fully yours, but he actually wants you to be an ambassador for this kingdom. You're not tomorrow's leaders, you're today's leaders. Like God's secret agenda is to actually use you in the world to bring light in dark places. and to learn your story and to learn how Jesus is sculpting and shaping your story on a daily basis so you can give the power and the joy of that to others. What is your story? Jesus says he's come to give life and life abundantly, and his life, friends, is quite expansive if we'll take him up on it. Yeah? You guys with me tonight? All right, man, let's seek him. Let's be a Jesus people who are hungry, man. God loves to reward those who are hungry in our faith and seek him, man, all right? As we come into worship, would you stand to your feet as we give Jesus, the King of Kings, glory tonight?
Before the throne